Ever wonder what really happened to some of history's most famous figures? Could their mysterious deaths have been prevented? Are some celebrity deaths actually unsolved mysteries hiding in plain sight? Number 9. Natalie Wood, the drowning that still raises questions. What happens when a Hollywood star who's afraid of dark water ends up drowned near a yacht? In November 1981, the world lost Natalie Wood under circumstances that continue to baffle investigators to this day. The 43-year-old actress, known for classics like West Side Story and Rebel Without a Cause, was spending Thanksgiving weekend on a yacht with her husband Robert Wagner and their friend Christopher Walken. The official story states that Wood fell overboard while trying to secure a dinghy that was banging against the hull of the yacht during a stormy night. But here's where things get weird. Wood had openly discussed her intense fear of dark water throughout her life. Friends knew she would never voluntarily get into a small boat at night. The evening before her death, witnesses at a nearby restaurant reported hearing Wagner and Walken engaged in a heated argument. When Wood's body was discovered the next morning, she was wearing a down jacket and nightgown, which would have quickly become waterlogged and heavy. The autopsy revealed bruises on her body and arms, along with a significant amount of alcohol in her system. For years, Wagner maintained that he had no idea what happened to his wife that night. He suggested she might have tried to leave the yacht after their argument. The case was initially ruled an accidental drowning, but in 2011, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department reopened the investigation. In 2018, they named Wagner as a person of interest, though he has never been charged with any crime related to her death. The boat's captain, Dennis Davern, later claimed he lied to police during the initial investigation and that Wagner had prevented immediate search efforts after Wood's disappearance. Decades later, we still don't know exactly what happened to Natalie Wood that night. The official cause of death was changed from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. Was it truly a tragic accident or something more sinister? The ocean keeps its secrets well, and this Hollywood mystery continues to haunt fans and investigators alike. Number 8. Bruce Lee, the death that launched 1,000 conspiracy theories. How does a seemingly healthy 32-year-old martial arts superstar die suddenly from a headache? On July 20, 1973, Bruce Lee complained of a headache, took a prescription painkiller, laid down for a nap, and never woke up. The official cause of death was listed as cerebral edema, swelling of the brain potentially triggered by an allergic reaction to the medication. But many found this explanation unsatisfying for a man who was the very picture of physical fitness. Lee had transformed from a martial arts instructor to an international film star, breaking barriers for Asian actors in Hollywood. His final film, Enter the Dragon, was released after his death and cemented his legacy. However, the circumstances surrounding his sudden passing spawned numerous conspiracy theories. Some claimed he was poisoned by triad gangsters. Others suggested he fell victim to a family curse. The dim mak or death touch theory proposed that Lee had been struck with a delayed action killing blow months before his death. Adding fuel to the conspiracy fire, Lee had collapsed previously in May 1973, suffering from cerebral edema then as well. He recovered from that incident, but the recurrence proved fatal. In 2018, researchers proposed that Lee's death might have resulted from hyponatremia, when the body retains too much water, diluting sodium levels in the bloodstream and causing cells to swell. Lee was known to have dramatically increased his water intake and reduced his solid food consumption in the months before his death. The mystery deepened when Lee's son, Brandon, died under unusual circumstances while filming The Crow in 1993. He was accidentally shot with a prop gun that was improperly loaded with a real bullet. The eerie parallels between father and son, both rising stars cut down in their prime while making films, only intensified speculation about a family curse. Despite numerous investigations and theories, we may never know exactly what caused Bruce Lee's sudden death. His legacy lives on through his films and martial arts philosophy, but the circumstances of his passing remain one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. Number 7. Marilyn Monroe, a death shrouded in conspiracy. Can one of the most famous women in the world die alone without anyone knowing what truly happened? On August 5, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her bedroom, naked and face down on her bed, with an empty bottle of sleeping pills nearby. The official cause of death was listed as probable suicide due to barbiturate overdose. But from the moment the news broke, people questioned this conclusion. Monroe, born Norma Jean Mortensen, had transformed herself from an orphanage child to the world's biggest sex symbol. At just 36 years old, she had already achieved legendary status in Hollywood with films like Some Like It Hot and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. But behind the glamorous facade, Monroe struggled with depression, substance abuse, and failed marriages to baseball star Joe DiMaggio and playwright Arthur Miller. The circumstances surrounding her death raised immediate red flags. No water glass was found in her room, making it difficult to understand how she swallowed the large number of pills. The autopsy revealed extremely high levels of pentobarbital and chloral hydrate in her bloodstream, yet no pill residue was found in her stomach. There were discrepancies in when her body was discovered and when authorities were called. Her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, changed her story multiple times about the events of that night. Then there were Monroe's famous connections. She allegedly had affairs with both President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, the Attorney General. Phone records showed calls to the White House in her final days. Some theories suggest she was murdered to prevent her from revealing state secrets or details about her relationships with the Kennedy brothers. Others believe she may have been killed by the CIA or FBI for the same reasons. Adding to the mystery, Monroe's psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, was one of the first people at the scene after her death was discovered. Some theorists believe he may have administered an enema with the drugs at someone else's direction, explaining the lack of pill residue in her stomach. Her personal diary and many other personal effects disappeared after her death, fueling speculation about what they might have contained. Despite multiple investigations, including a 1982 review by the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, no definitive conclusion about foul play has ever been reached. The official ruling remains probable suicide, but the cloud of mystery surrounding Marilyn Monroe's final hours continues to fascinate the public decades after her death. Number 6. Edgar Allan Poe, the mystery that would make a perfect Poe story. What happens when the master of macabre fiction dies under circumstances straight out of one of his own tales? On October 3, 1849, Edgar Allan Poe was found delirious on the streets of Baltimore, wearing clothes that weren't his own. He was taken to Washington College Hospital, where he spent 4 days alternating between fits of delirium, hallucinations, and calm coherence before dying on October 7th. The cause of death was listed as congestion of the brain, a vague term that could have referred to anything from alcohol poisoning to meningitis. Poe, famous for works like The Raven and The Telltale Heart, had struggled with alcohol throughout his adult life. The most straightforward explanation for his condition was delirium tremens from alcohol withdrawal or poisoning. However, witnesses at the hospital reported that Poe repeatedly called out the name Reynolds during his delirium, a person who has never been identified in relation to the author. Even more strangely, all medical records related to his hospitalization, including his death certificate, have been lost. Several theories have emerged to explain Poe's bizarre final days. One suggests he was a victim of cooping, a practice where gangs would kidnap people, drug them, and force them to vote multiple times in different disguises during elections. October 3, 1849, was indeed an election day in Baltimore. This might explain why Poe was found in clothes that weren't his own. Other theories propose that Poe suffered from rabies, explaining his delirium and hydrophobia, fear of water, reported by hospital staff. Some medical experts who have reviewed the historical accounts believe he may have had a brain tumor that finally proved fatal. Still others suspect carbon monoxide poisoning or heavy metal poisoning. Adding to the mystery, Poe's original grave marker was destroyed, and the identity of the Reynolds he called for remains unknown. Joseph Walker, the man who found Poe on the street, disappeared from historical record immediately after these events. Even the cause of Poe's travel to Baltimore remains unclear, as he had been on his way to Philadelphia for an editing job. The irony that the creator of the detective story genre died in a mystery worthy of his own imagination has not been lost on literary historians. Nearly 2 centuries later, we're no closer to understanding what really happened during Edgar Allan Poe's final days, making his death as enduring a mystery as his most famous works. Number 5. Harry Houdini, the escape he couldn't make. Can the world's greatest escape artist be killed by a simple punch to the stomach? On October 31, 1926, Halloween Harry Houdini died of peritonitis resulting from a ruptured appendix. The story goes that a few days earlier, a university student named J. Gordon Whitehead had approached Houdini after a performance in Montreal and asked if it was true that he could withstand any punch to the abdomen. Before Houdini could properly prepare himself, Whitehead delivered several powerful blows to his stomach. Houdini, born Eric Weiss in Hungary, had made his name performing seemingly impossible escapes from handcuffs, straitjackets, sealed containers, and even being buried alive. He was known for his physical conditioning and ability to control his body in ways that seemed superhuman. But no one can prepare for a ruptured appendix. Despite being in severe pain after the punches, Houdini continued his tour, performing in Detroit while running a 104-degree fever. He finally collapsed on stage and was taken to the hospital, where doctors discovered his appendix had ruptured several days earlier, spreading infection throughout his abdomen. Despite emergency surgery, he died on Halloween, creating a dramatic end fitting for the world's most famous magician. But the story gets stranger. Houdini had spent the latter part of his career debunking spiritualists and mediums who claimed to communicate with the dead. He made a pact with his wife Bess that if communication from beyond the grave was possible, he would send her a pre-arranged coded message. Rasse Bell, believe. For 10 years after his death, Bess held seances on Halloween trying to contact her husband, but eventually gave up, famously declaring, 10 years is long enough to wait for any man. Some have questioned whether the punches really caused Houdini's appendicitis, as medical science now understands that trauma typically doesn't cause the condition. Others wonder if Whitehead's attack was random, or if he might have been sent by spiritualists angry at Houdini's debunking efforts. The student was never charged with any crime, and surprisingly little is known about him after the incident. Adding to the mysterious circumstances, Houdini had received death threats from spiritualists whose fraudulent practices he had exposed. He had also made powerful enemies in the entertainment world. Some conspiracy theorists even suggest he was poisoned, pointing to symptoms that could be consistent with certain toxins. Whether Houdini's death was simply an unfortunate medical emergency exacerbated by trauma or something more sinister remains unanswered. What we do know is that even the greatest escape artist of all time couldn't escape death when it finally came for him. Number 4. Michael Jackson, the king of pop's controversial final act. How does a global superstar preparing for a comeback tour end up dead from a surgical anesthetic in his bedroom? On June 25, 2009, Michael Jackson was found unresponsive in his rented Los Angeles mansion. His personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, had administered the powerful anesthetic propofol to help Jackson sleep, a highly unusual and dangerous use of a drug normally reserved for hospital operating rooms. Despite resuscitation attempts, Jackson was pronounced dead at the hospital. The subsequent investigation revealed a troubling picture of the final months of Jackson's life. The 50-year-old singer was preparing for his This Is It comeback tour, a series of 50 concerts scheduled at London's O2 Arena. Under immense pressure, Jackson was struggling with chronic insomnia and had become increasingly dependent on medications to sleep. Murray was being paid $150,000 a month to provide Jackson with the sleep medication he demanded. The Los Angeles County coroner ruled Jackson's death a homicide, determining that he died from a combination of propofol and benzodiazepines. Murray was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter and served 2 years of a 4-year sentence. But questions have persisted about whether Murray was the only one responsible for Jackson's death, or if he was simply the last in a long line of doctors who catered to Jackson's pharmaceutical demands. Jackson's final years were marked by financial troubles, with the singer reportedly $500 million in debt at the time of his death. Some have suggested that the pressure to perform the comeback concerts, which would have stabilized his finances, led to his desperate measures to combat insomnia. Others point to his long history of prescription drug use, dating back to the 1984 Pepsi commercial accident that left him with serious burns and initiated his use of painkillers. The autopsy revealed that Jackson was surprisingly healthy for his age, aside from some lung damage and arthritis. He weighed only 136 pounds, but was not anorexic as some had speculated. His body contained numerous injection sites and scars, consistent with his known medical procedures and drug use. Strangely, Jackson was nearly completely bald, wearing wigs to conceal this fact from the public. After his death, the value of Jackson's estate skyrocketed, resolving his debt crisis and making his children exceedingly wealthy. This financial turnaround has led some conspiracy theorists to suggest that Jackson faked his own death, though there is absolutely no evidence to support this claim. While the immediate cause of Jackson's death is clear, the circumstances that led to a world-famous entertainer receiving a surgical anesthetic in his bedroom point to a perfect storm of celebrity, enablement, financial pressure, and desperation. The King of Pop's final act became one of the most bizarre and preventable celebrity deaths in modern history. Number 3. Jimi Hendrix, the guitar legend's murky final hours. Why would one of rock's greatest guitarists asphyxiate on his own vomit when he rarely drank alcohol? On September 18, 1970, Jimi Hendrix was found unresponsive in an apartment in London. He was rushed to the hospital but pronounced dead shortly thereafter. The official cause of death was asphyxiation from choking on his own vomit while intoxicated on barbiturates. This seems straightforward, but the circumstances surrounding Hendrix's death have raised questions for decades. Monica Dannemann, his girlfriend at the time, claimed she had left Hendrix sleeping in her apartment to buy cigarettes, and upon returning found him unconscious but breathing. She called an ambulance at 11:18 a.m., but when paramedics arrived, they found the apartment empty except for Hendrix, who was already dead. Years later, Dannemann changed her story, claiming she had been with him when the ambulance was called. The ambulance crew reported that the apartment was neat and tidy, with no signs of drug use. They also stated the apartment door was wide open and nobody was present. However, the pathologist found that Hendrix had been dead for some time before the ambulance was called, suggesting a significant delay in seeking medical help. Hendrix, just 27 years old, had revolutionized electric guitar playing and was at the height of his creative powers. But he was also exhausted from touring and dealing with business problems with his manager, Michael Jeffrey. Conspiracies around his death have pointed to Jeffrey, who had taken out a $2 million life insurance policy on Hendrix. Some theories suggest Hendrix was murdered by being forced to ingest pills and wine, pointing to the large amount of wine found in his lungs and stomach despite the fact that he wasn't known as a wine drinker. Adding to the mystery, Dannemann herself died by suicide in 1996, shortly after losing a defamation case brought by another of Hendrix's former girlfriends. With her death, a key witness to Hendrix's final hours was silenced forever. In 2009, a former roadie for Hendrix claimed that the star was actually murdered by Jeffrey, who allegedly confessed to him that he had Hendrix killed because the guitarist wanted to end their management contract. According to this account, hired killers broke into Hendrix's room, forced pills and wine down his throat, and left him to die. However, no concrete evidence has ever emerged to support this claim. British authorities never conducted a full inquest into Hendrix's death, and the exact circumstances of his final hours remain clouded in contradiction and mystery. Like many great artists who died at 27, Hendrix left behind questions that may never be fully answered, along with a musical legacy that continues to influence generations of guitarists. Number 2, Bob Marley, the reggae icon and the mysterious toe injury. How does a small injury to the toe eventually claim the life of music's most influential reggae artist? In 1977, Bob Marley was injured while playing soccer in Paris, sustaining what appeared to be a minor wound to his right big toe. When the wound refused to heal, doctors discovered a form of malignant melanoma and aggressive skin cancer under his toenail. They advised immediate amputation of the toe, but Marley refused, citing his Rastafarian beliefs prohibiting cutting the flesh. Instead, Marley opted for a less invasive procedure to remove just the nail and nail bed. He continued touring and recording despite his diagnosis, creating some of his most powerful work, including the album Uprising. By 1980, however, the cancer had spread throughout his body. While jogging in Central Park in New York, he collapsed and doctors discovered tumors in his brain, lungs, and liver. Marley attempted an alternative cancer treatment in Germany under the care of controversial physician Joseph Issels, whose unorthodox methods have been questioned by the medical establishment. The treatment was unsuccessful, and Marley died on May 11, 1981, at the age of 36 while attempting to return to his home in Jamaica. His final words to his son Ziggy were reported to be, "Money can't buy life." The circumstances surrounding Marley's illness have spawned numerous conspiracy theories. Some believe the toe injury was not accidental but rather the work of the CIA, who allegedly placed a copper wire contaminated with cancer-causing agents in his boot. Proponents of this theory point to documented CIA operations against left-leaning political figures in Jamaica during the Cold War era and Marley's significant political influence in the country. His One Love peace concert in 1978 had brought together opposing political leaders during a time of civil unrest. Others question whether the cancer diagnosis was correct in the first place, suggesting that Marley might have had a treatable infection that was misdiagnosed. The rarity of acral lentiginous melanoma, the type Marley had in light-skinned populations, and its greater prevalence among people with darker skin, has also raised questions about whether environmental factors rather than genetics might have played a role. Some Rastafarians believe that Marley was poisoned by enemies opposed to his religious and political messages. The fact that the injury occurred in Paris, far from Jamaica, has fueled speculation that international agents might have been involved. While medical experts maintain that Marley simply fell victim to an aggressive cancer that could have been treated had he accepted conventional medical advice earlier, the questions surrounding his initial injury and subsequent illness continue to be debated by fans and conspiracy theorists alike. His premature death cut short the life of a musical prophet whose messages of peace, unity, and resistance continue to resonate worldwide. Number 1, Princess Diana, the Paris crash that shook the world. Was it really just a tragic accident that killed the world's most famous princess? On August 31, 1997, Princess Diana, her companion Dodi Fayed, and their driver Henry Paul were killed when their Mercedes crashed in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris while attempting to evade pursuing paparazzi. The only survivor was Diana's bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, who was severely injured. The official investigation concluded that Henry Paul, acting security manager of the Hotel Ritz Paris, was driving under the influence of alcohol and prescription drugs, losing control of the vehicle while traveling at high speed. Blood tests showed his blood alcohol level was 3 times the French legal limit. The investigation also found that none of the occupants except Rees-Jones were wearing seatbelts, contributing to the severity of their injuries. Diana, 36, had separated from Prince Charles in 1992 and finalized their divorce in 1996. She had been vacationing with Dodi, son of billionaire Mohammed Al Fayed, sparking media frenzy about their relationship. On the night of the crash, they had dined at the Ritz Hotel before attempting to travel to Dodi's apartment. Almost immediately after the crash, conspiracy theories began to circulate. Mohammed Al Fayed has been particularly vocal, claiming that the crash was orchestrated by British intelligence agencies at the behest of the royal family, particularly Prince Philip. According to this theory, the royals could not accept Diana's relationship with Dodi, a Muslim, especially if she had been pregnant with his child, as some have alleged. Other theories point to suspicious elements surrounding the crash. The presence of a white Fiat Uno that allegedly made contact with the Mercedes but was never found. Reports of a bright flash in the tunnel before the crash. The fact that it took over an hour to get Diana to hospital despite there being closer facilities. And the absence of CCTV footage from the tunnel despite numerous cameras in the area. In 2008, after a lengthy inquest, a British jury returned a verdict of unlawful killing due to the gross negligence of driver Henry Paul and the pursuing paparazzi. The investigation found no evidence of a conspiracy to murder Diana and Dodi. However, this has done little to quell alternative theories, with polls showing that a significant percentage of the British public believes there was foul play involved. Diana's death triggered an unprecedented outpouring of public grief, with over 3 million people lining the route of her funeral procession. The sea of flowers left outside Kensington Palace demonstrated how deeply she had touched people around the world through her humanitarian work and her vulnerability in the public eye. More than 2 decades later, the circumstances surrounding Diana's death continue to fascinate and disturb. Was it simply a tragic accident caused by a drunk driver trying to evade aggressive photographers? Or was something more sinister at play in the Parisian tunnel that night? The mystery persists, fed by our collective inability to accept that someone so extraordinary could die in such a seemingly preventable way. Could some of these deaths have been prevented? Will we ever know the full truth behind these mysterious passings? Or are some secrets meant to remain buried with those who took them to their graves?